I'm going to make you the spotlight, and you can go for it. Chavod.
No, thank you. And thank you, Rabbi Hassan, for hosting us. I also have with me tonight Avigail Buchler, who is our Director for Community Affairs. And she can also feel free to jump in if I'm saying something wrong or, being just Israeli, like you said, and correcting me and asking and saying whatever she wants. And I'm a diplomat and I'm a lawyer, so I can basically speak forever, but I will not, I'll try to stop myself after, like you said, 15, 20 minutes or maybe less. Just to touch upon a few things that I think can be relevant and interesting. But like you said, Rabbi, if people want to ask or say or comment or disagree about stuff that I'm not talking about, then obviously feel free. One last thing that I say is that I hope that we can also do more of these kind of interactions in the future and talk about other stuff, because Israel has so many elements to it and so many levels and so many layers. So I'm sure there's others. Many other topics we can talk about. And thank you all for joining. Just a few words about the consulate. For those who are not familiar with our work, we are one of 8 consulates Israel has in the United States. It's a large number. Most countries have less than that. I mean, Mexico has like 50 consulates, 50 in the United States. So, but 8 consulates for a small country like Israel is a high number. There's a consulate in Boston, in New York, in Atlanta, in Houston, Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, and of course the best one is here in San Francisco. We cover 5.5 states. Northern California is the half because there's a consulate in LA. And then Washington, which again is the best state, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska. And we are we are what we call a medium scale team, about 20 something staff, divided into 2 pillars. One is more administration, security, and the consular section, and I'll talk a little bit about the consular work that we do. And then the other half is what we call public diplomacy. There's a department for political affairs, economic relations, strengthening the economic ties between our 5.5 states and the state of Israel, culture, bringing Israeli culture to the area. And there's a lot of interesting things we're going to do with Seattle. For example, the Seattle Jewish Film Festival, the Music for Remembrance that is coming soon in January. We were partnering with that organization and more stuff. The community affairs, the Abigail's department, and not just Jewish community. I mean, we are the Consulate General of Israel, but we work with the Latino, African American, LGBTQ, and other communities in the Christian churches, and we want to be able to strengthen the relationship of each of those communities with the state of Israel, and more. Like I said, it's a limited staff. We basically do, I usually ask college campuses, so what do you think is the difference between an embassy and a consulate? And a lot of them say, embassy is doing the important work and the consulate is doing the less important work. And I always say, I always answer them, I'm not offended. I mean, I'm not taking it personally. And it's actually, the answer for the difference between a consulate and an embassy is actually more simple. The embassy will always, and I'm putting a little star next to the word always be in the capital city. So we have our embassy to Washington, D.C., and then 8 consulates around the country. We have an embassy in Berlin and a consulate in Munich, an embassy in New Delhi and a consulate in Mumbai. The little star that I put next to always is that there's one country in the world where you have most of the embassies in a city that's not the capital city, and that's Israel, actually. There's more than 150 embassies in Tel Aviv, and only a handful, very few embassies in our capital city, which is Jerusalem. The American embassy being one. I'm sure you remember the 2016 moving of the embassy, the big event that took place, and then very few other countries have their embassies in Jerusalem. But other than that, the work that we do is very similar to the work that the embassy is doing, just on a local basis. Instead of having the president visit Israel, we make sure that the governors, lieutenant governors, legislators, senators, congressmen, we we strengthen the relationship with them, and then we make sure that they go and they visit Israel, and it's very important for us, and especially in a day like this, post the election, very fresh after the election, that for us as the state of Israel, we keep a bipartisan policy down the line. We work with Democrats and Republicans, conservative, progressive, liberals, across the board. And if you ask almost every Israeli in the street of Israel, if you go and visit, they'll tell you that the relationship between Israel and the United States is one of the most, if not the most, important strategic asset that the state of Israel has. So that's why it's extremely important for us to keep it bipartisan down the line. And that's what we do here. I was in Idaho meeting mostly Republican legislators just a couple of weeks ago, and working with them and making sure that post-COVID they go and visit Israel. Same with the progressives in San Francisco and in Seattle. That's very important. So that's just a little bit of overview about the political work that we do. On the consular side, and I'll divide it into, let's say, pre and post-COVID, and then now during COVID. So on regular days, we mostly work with Israelis who lost their passport or their passport got stolen. Israelis can be very creative when it comes to their passport. I've seen passport in washing machines and dryers and microwaves, and there's stories to go for days. So we work with Israelis on their travel documents, Israelis in need. Every concern that Israelis have in our region, they know that they can contact us.
Can I jump in?
Please, yes, do.
I've got a question on passports, and that is, if someone has an Israeli passport which has recently expired, how can they get a new passport? They still need to go down to San Francisco.
So the answer is no. If you're talking about adults, so seniors over 18, all they have to do is go on our website, and then there's an application for a new passport for an Israeli adult, fill the form, attach whatever they ask for, 2 pictures, they ask for the old passport, there's a cost for it, and then send it to us, and we can renew passports through mail, so through post, FedEx, USPS or UPS, whatever, and then there's no need to come to the consulate. And
what about us with our small children who need their passport every 5 years?
So for kids,
and it's difficult to travel because then we're going to have to take COVID tests or go into 2 weeks of quarantine or whatever it might be. Is there any way around it, or is it also we have to go down still?
So for under 18, you're talking about if it's a renewal, then that's one thing. And in some cases for renewal, we can do it also through mail. But to issue a first passport to a minor, there is a need to come and visit the consulate just for the first time. And all this information is on our website. So, and in some very extreme random cases, we can ask for, in case, God forbid, there's an illness in the family, if there's an emergency basis, then we can ask for an exemption of having the kid not coming to San Francisco and do. The idea is to identify the kid and then to identify the parents and make sure that there's no, God forbid, an attempt to kidnap the child. But in some rare cases, we can do it through Zoom or FaceTime or video chat, basically. So, but that is, and by the way, I'll say already at this point, if people have private questions, specific questions, Rabbi, feel free to write my direct email in the chat. And for every consular concern, people can contact me directly and I can look into the specific cases of every family.
Yeah, Abigail, can you put those details in as well? In the chat, thank you.
Okay, yeah, okay, so that's...
I've got another question for you.
Sure, yes, please.
While you're on, I hope you don't mind my chutzpah a little bit here.
I'm good, please.
Can you talk about the requirement of having Hebrew documents notarized by attorney notaries versus non-attorney notaries?
Yes, so we at the consulate, we provide notary services for anybody who needs it. Now during COVID, we had decided because we try to limit the number of visitors at the consulate, because notary requires a visit to the consulate. We can't identify someone without actually seeing them, and we have to sign it. The law says that for notary, we have to sign it in front of the person that signs. Then we now during COVID, we limited our notary services to specific affairs, specific issues that are relevant in Israel. So it's not general power of attorneys, not general documents that are required notary. For that, there's other options that are, I think, also more comfortable in Seattle through the bank or private notaries. But things that has to do, for example, with banks in Israel, real estate in Israel, people who need to sign, for example, proof of living. There's a document for Israeli Bituach Leumi, Social Security. So very specific, and the list also is on the website. For those specific cases, then we can set an appointment at the consulate, have you, whoever needs, sign in front of the consul in the consulate. Okay, so that's passport. We talked about notary. And then for non-Israelis, the most urgent thing, let's say again, pre and post-COVID are visas. You Americans, you know that if it's not during COVID, then you don't need visas. You can go with your American passport to Israel and spend there up to three months with just, there's a visa. There's actually a one-sided visa waiver. So Israelis need visa to go to the United States, but Americans don't need to go visa. They don't need visas if they want to be tourists and travel to Israel up to 3 months. But even not during COVID, students require visa, business people require visa, people who want to do aliyah require their visa, people who go and volunteer or work, and then non-Americans. We service people with Indian, Chinese, a lot of other countries in the world that do require visa. During COVID, it's a little trickier. People can't just hop on a plane and travel to Israel. Israel, unfortunately, it currently is still a red, just like the United States, it's a red country that has decided to limit the entryway to Israel, basically the Ben Gurion airport and the land crossings. So for those who want to go to Israel during COVID, they need a specific reason. The first exemption is for Israeli citizens. Israeli citizens who carry Israeli passport can go to Israel. They have to quarantine themselves for 14 days, but they can go with their Israeli passport and visit Israel. People who are first-degree relatives of Israeli citizens and spent at least 90 days in the during 2019 can also join their Israeli partners and visit Israel. Other than those, there is a list of exemptions. People who have already registered to learn in Israel, either in a yeshiva or in a high school or in a university or in a college, they can go and spend their academic year in Israel. Athletes, people on an emergency basis can ask if they have a relative that's not first degree, or that is first degree but haven't spent 90 days in Israel in the last calendar year, can ask for an emergency permit to get into Israel. There's a list of documents that people have to add to the request to visit Israel these days. For example, they have to add medical insurance saying that that medical insurance covers COVID. They have to add a form saying that basically they have a place to spend their 14 days of quarantine, self-quarantine. Add obviously their passport, the reasoning behind the request, and then if they're going to be students, then a permit from the university. If they're gonna, if they're, for example, experts and they want to work in a specific field in Israel, a letter from the employer. So there's again, it's all specified, detailed in the website. But at this point, unfortunately, still for months now, entering Israel is a little tricky. So and then again, we take care of it in the consulate. So if you have any personal questions for yourself, neighbors, friends, family members, people who you want to ask for, then refer them to us. My email, again, should be on the chat, so you can write it down and shoot me an email on that. Yeah, I just see it popped on the chat. So that's for COVID, visas. That's most of the consular work that we do. One more thing that we are, just like an interesting thing that we take care of, and it's unique for Israel. According to the Israeli law, the Israeli consul has to visit the Israeli prisoners that in our jurisdiction, once every 6 months. That's something that, I mean, I've checked in a lot of other diplomatic missions. It's unique to Israel. And it's not to retrial their cases, but it's just to make sure that the Israeli prisoners, and currently we have, I think, 6 or 7 in our area, to make sure that they get the basic humanitarian needs, bed, food, access to Bible, access to challah and wine for Kiddush on Friday, for example, on Shabbat Eve. So there's, again, some consular service that we, as the consulate, provide. So that's a little bit. That's basically what we are. I'll say a few words about COVID in Israel, because I think it's an interesting topic to talk about. And then I want to say a few words about the new peace agreements, the Abraham Accord. That's something huge that is changing the Middle East. And then we can just open it up, and we'll talk about whatever you have in mind. So regarding COVID, I'll say that at the beginning, March, when COVID started, Israel was one of the first countries to react very well to COVID, actually. Closed the airport, closed the schools, gyms, basically all the non-essentials. So at the beginning, we saw very, very low numbers of COVID cases in Israel. Israel is a little over 9 million people. And then as the time went by, I think this won't shock any of you, but I'll let you know that Israelis can be a little impatient. That won't come as a surprise to you guys. So just as we opened everything just as we closed everything very quickly in March, then we opened things very quickly. Already in the beginning of May, malls, shopping malls, movie theaters, gyms, everything was all open pretty rapidly. And then in June and July, and especially right before the Chagim, so the end of August, the beginning of September, we saw a very, very high number of cases in Israel. Israel was actually one of the countries in the world with the largest number of cases per day. Think about 9 million people and around 8,000, the peak was around 8,000 cases per day. When in May and June, we had even, let's say the beginning of May, we had like 20, 30, 40 cases per day, jumped to 8,000. So then the decision was during the Chagim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, to have the second full complete quarantine all over Israel. And then after the Chagim, the number actually dropped to 200, 300, 400 cases. Now, unlike in May, we're opening things on a more graduate level, like, step by step, and not opening it up. So first graders and second graders, for example, only street shops and not malls. So we're doing it pretty much what I saw in Seattle and in San Francisco, more patiently, which is something that's very difficult for us as Israelis, but it's proving itself. Unfortunately, the last few days since Sunday, we see again a spike. And they're talking about, before the winter especially, of stopping the opening measures until we see again the numbers go down to 100, 200 cases per day, and not 600 and 800 like we see now. On the bright side of things, I know that you're all following the Pfizer, Moderna vaccine attempt. I can say that out of 180 companies around the world, there are around a dozen companies that already started the phase 3 of clinical trials with the COVID-19 vaccine. And I'm happy, the leading companies, Pfizer, Moderna, Oxford, there's a Russian company, there's a Chinese company, and I'm happy to say that there's also an Israeli company called IBI, the Israeli Biological Institute, working very well. Not the numbers of the third stage, the clinical trials are lower than in Pfizer. They're starting with a few hundreds at this point, but they're moving forward, and they're one of dozen companies around the world that are moving forward toward the vaccine. And they're already, just like Pfizer did, even though the clinical trial hasn't proven itself, they're still manufacturing about 1 million vaccines while waiting for the experiments results. So we might have parallel or on top or right next to the American vaccine and the German vaccine and the British vaccine, we can also see a blue and white Israeli vaccine, which is very exciting. So we should all, fingers crossed that we'll see a vaccine soon. And if it can be an Israeli vaccine, that's just the cherry on the icing. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that last month, or already a month and a half ago in mid-September, we had an historical peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain that's called the Abraham Accords, a peace agreement that we have not seen in the Middle East since more than a quarter of a century ago. In 1994, Israel signed the last peace agreement with the Kingdom of Jordan, King Hussein and Yitzhak Rabin. I'm sure some of you remember the images of that ceremony. And then before that, with Egypt in 1979, Sadat and Begin. So that's the third and fourth and now fifth peace agreements. And like I said, the first after 25 years. It started with United Arab Emirates, moved to Bahrain, and now also a declaration of normalization that just happened less than a month ago on October 18th with Sudan. So definitely historic, definitely, I mean, there's a lot of criticism from all sides, but the fact that the narrative of having every peace agreement in the Middle East going through the Palestinian and the Palestinian conflict is no longer existing. We see Arab countries in the Middle East signing peace agreements with the state of Israel and actually criticizing the Palestinians for being naysayers and for and separating the fact that they want to have political, economical, research, medical ties with Israel, an actual peace agreement, regardless of the Palestinian question. And just one last statistic, because some peace agreements can be just, a piece of paper, a nice ceremony, and some peace agreements can have real content and basis to it. Just now, they have announced that between Israel and UAE, two companies, Dubai Air and Emirates, which is one of the most famous flight in the world, air carriers in the world, they will have, just these two companies will have 2 flights every day between Tel Aviv and Dubai, 14 flights a week. And then that's without the 2 Israeli companies, Israel and Arkia. And then that's without 2 other, El Al and Etihad, that haven't even announced how many flights they'll do. So at least at this point during COVID, 2 companies out of 6 will have 14 flights every day. And that has to do with, commerce. It has to do with science. It has to do with the fact that Israel has declared that they're going to open 3 embassies. If I didn't love San Francisco so much, I would have applied to be a diplomat over there. But 3 diplomatic missions in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, and in Manama. That's the capital of Bahrain. In the very near future, UAE will open an embassy in Israel very soon as well. There's a lot going on. We're talking about Sudan as the 3rd country, and and I cannot. The reason at this point I can't name more countries, but there are talks, and you can read it. You can read it in the media of other names like Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and other countries in the Middle East that might join this peace initiative that's taken over the Middle East. I'll stop here.
Matan, I hear that people are thinking of doing weddings in there because it's a green country. So right. You can UAE. Actually, we have one of our congregants. Their brother's getting married in Dubai because it's a safe place for everyone to travel to.
Right, and
who would have said that someone's getting married in Dubai because it's safe? It's right. Incredible times.
And the hotels there are not too shabby.
And now there's going to be ochel kasher, kosher food there too, right?
Right. Kosher food. I mean, it's easy because it's Middle Eastern food. So it's going to be very familiar to the Israelis, and it's going to be kosher. So, that's pa'amayim kitov. It's double the fun.
And my friend Rabbi Eli Abadi is going to be is moving today from New York to be a rabbi in UAE as well. So lots of connections that we're having.
Yeah, and I can tell you that my cousin he was there on business, just came back to Israel. I spoke to him, and he said they love us there. They really admire the Israeli innovation, the Israeli spirit, the Israeli creativity. I told him, give them a month, give them 2 months, they'll get to know like all the Israelis, and then they might love us less. But definitely Israelis are being accepted there with open arms, and that's incredible.
So, Matan, there's lots of obvious advantages to these peace accords, but there are also concerns. Can you talk about concerns with sharing weapons deals with America sharing weapons deals? Do you have any concerns for that? I know it's all very nice now at the beginning. It sounds like wonderful opportunities of sharing ideas and sharing resources, but are there any concerns, and how are those concerns being mitigated? How are we being careful about that, if you're able to share?
Yeah, so I've heard it's something that the Israeli press covers all the time. The fact that basically Israel has given a green light for you guys, for the Americans, to sell the F-35 to the Emirates, not you personally, but the government. But I think that if you weigh all the circumstances, and especially the fact that we know who is let's say, the tiger in the room, who is the number one cause in the Middle East for instability, which is Iran, and the location of UAE and location of Bahrain in proximity to Iran, I think there's concerns, but there are also possibilities. And Iran and we can have this whole, like I said, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, just talking about Iran's aggression in the Middle East, in the region, and in the world, financing terror organizations all over, not just in Israel, not just Hamas, not just Hezbollah in Lebanon, not just the Houthis in Yemen, but we see the terror attacks in Europe, just last week in France and in Austria, in Vienna. And the fact that we have an ally in that region of the Gulf is a concern in a way, but it's also an opportunity. The concern is because the Middle East is not a stable area, and people can say, we don't know what's going to happen to this and that regime 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. But I think it's also an opportunity, and I think the United States, regardless of everything you see, you read, and you hear, is also committed to the military quality advantage that Israel has in the Middle East, and this is something that will not be jeopardized.
Can you talk a little bit about the nature of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel feelings which have been promoted in Arab lands since the establishment of the State of Israel, how that suddenly goes away with these peace accords? Like, one of the things they say is that it's too hard to have peace with the Palestinians because of the reinforced hatred of Israelis. How does that change? How is that different in Arab countries, that we're not as concerned about that? That they're excited about our ingenuity, they're excited to meet us. Is there no concern for just decades of racism and anti-Semitism, that's going to be there too?
So I'll start by saying that the end of this month, and maybe Abigail can say a few words about that a little later, but we're hosting an event, and you can find it on the Consulate's website and the Consulate's Facebook page, celebrating the life and legacies of Jews from Arab lands in Iran. And we're going to have 2 testimonies, people telling their stories. We're going to have really nice Yemenite and Arab music, and we're engaging with 8 Hillels, 8 universities, to have more college students learning about the stories, the amazing legacies of Jews from Libya and from Egypt and from Tunisia and from Lebanon and from Syria and from Iran and from Iraq, Baghdadi Jews, and really all over the region. And not a lot of kids, not a lot of college students know that. For many generations in these countries, Jews had lived amazing life and prospered. And in the early mid 20th century, a lot of things have changed, and people talk about the Palestinian refugees, but they don't talk about the more than 500,000 Jews that had to, in many cases overnight, leave Egypt and leave Syria and leave Iraq and flee with nothing other than the clothes to their backs. And many of them found their ways to the United States and to Israel. So that's a story that I agree with you should not be ignored and should not be disregarded. I think there's a new spirit, there's a new generation of leadership in a lot of those Arab countries. Again, like I said before, that don't look at their bilateral relationship only through the prism and through the angle of the Palestinians. Unfortunately, the Palestinians for decades, not just today, are famous. I'm sure I'm not going to be the first one to tell you that they don't miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They sided with the Nazis. They said no to the Field Committee in 1937, to the UN partition plan, giving them a state in 1947. From the second Camp David in 1999 to 2006, Prime Minister Sharon, every time they got this opportunity to have their own country, they said no. And you can read in main stage Arab press today interviews with Saudi leadership and leadership from the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and other countries criticizing the Palestinian leadership because the Palestinians took 24 hours to denounce the Abraham Accord, the peace agreement, and saying that they're backstabbing the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people. So I think there's new spirit, there's new leadership. What we've been seeing in the last few months is definitely a change in the mindset. I remember when I was posted in Mumbai. My first diplomatic mission between 2013 and 2015 was in India, in Mumbai. And I remember flying to Mumbai from Tel Aviv. Took me 8 hours because we have to fly south to Eilat, the Red Sea, basically bypassing Saudi Arabia into India. And today, even though we don't have formal diplomatic relationship with Saudi, the Saudi government is allowing blue and white halal flights to fly across their sky into India and towards the east. So we definitely see winds of change.
And can you talk, and do you know what is the average UAE citizen think about all of this? I mean, I know what the governments are thinking, because that's why we have these peace initiatives and these accords. Do we know what the average, I know there is an average, but what an average citizen there is thinking? Like suddenly decades of positions have suddenly changed overnight. Are they not? Is it so straightforward to say that they are saying, yes, it's time to focus on bigger pictures, or is that a genuine concern?
So I think, I mean, if you look at the history and look at the demographic of the UAE, Israel never had a real conflict with UAE. And when I joined the Foreign Service almost 10 years ago, one of the most known secrets is that we do have some kind of a diplomatic relationship behind the stage with UAE. So there was always some type of a cooperation. For example, we had presence there as part of the Middle Eastern Water Initiative, Middle Eastern Energy Initiative, data, so there was always some type of, let's say, on the business side, international partnership side of, and I think there was also always an admiration to the fact that just like them, Israel is a small country, managed to move in very short time, from an agricultural no man's land type of scenario, which was Israel in the early 20th century, into an high-tech and a regional force to be reckoned with, and they see themselves in the same way. So I think there's mutual admiration. And if you ask me, the average UAE person in the street, like I said, and I follow a lot of their, let's say, think leaders on Twitter, bloggers, famous like journalists, admiration and respect towards Israel and Israelis.
I'm really glad to hear that. We have a lot of, but we have couples who are retiring, who are wanting to retire to Israel. Do you have any advice for them on how they should move forward with COVID? And is it just normal, go through Nefesh B'Nefesh? Is there anything else which they should be doing?
Yeah, Nefesh B'Nefesh is the right way. Jewish agency, they're based in Los Angeles. And then we, as the consulate, we help in the last stage after they get a permit to do Aliyah and to move to Israel from the Jewish agency or Nefesh B'Nefesh. Then we help with the visa, and then we are the last stop. And if you need us to connect, whoever is asking to connect them with the Jewish agency and Nefesh B'Nefesh, we're happy to do that.
Wonderful. A nice layup question for you. How many languages do you speak?
How many languages? 1.5. So Hebrew and a little bit of English. I was supposed to study. It's funny. I was supposed to study Marathi, which is the language that they speak in Maharashtra, in Mumbai. I tried a little bit, and then I failed dramatically. So the only thing that I actually know from when I was in Mumbai is how to say in Marathi, "You have dialed the wrong number." That I know how to say. Because the phone system is so difficult. I've heard the sentence so many times that I learned how to say that. But yeah, but English and Hebrew and English.
Okay, and what about Israelis wanting to go back?
So for that, we have within the consulate, we have a representative. Her name is Adi, and she represents the Israeli Ministry of Absorption, it's called the Israeli House. So we can refer whoever is an Israeli who wants to go back to Israel. I will be able to connect them with Adi, and she is the one-stop shop to Israelis who want to go back to Israel through the Israeli House.
I don't want to get political with this question, but it has been asked. How do you see the political landscape changing in the Middle East with a change of administration?
Wow. So how much?
And again, I don't want to get into politics too much. I'm just more of a, but I think it's on a lot of people's minds. You know, what's going to happen with the embassy? What's going to happen with Iran? What's going to happen with the Palestinian Authority?
Do you have 2 hours for me to answer the question? So it's hard to say. I think this current administration is an administration that we are familiar with in many ways, because I think Israel had an amazing 8 years with Obama, just like we had an amazing 8 years with President Bush, and amazing 4 years with Trump. So like I said at the beginning, we do our best to keep it bipartisan and get along with every administration that's in office. Specific things about Iran, I can't believe anybody will move the embassy back to Tel Aviv, but I don't know. There's always a possibility. I don't see it. I think the fact once the embassy has moved. By the way, my 98-year-old grandma lives right across the street, the American embassy in Jerusalem, in Armon HaNatziv, which is the neighborhood that she lives in, where the embassy is. And she's one of the biggest fan of the fact that they changed it from a consulate to an embassy. A, because she has a more secured street now, because the ambassador lives there. And B, because she really believes in having an American embassy and having embassies in Jerusalem. She is a Jerusalemite. I'm actually a 9th generation in Jerusalem. So my family, that's where I was born, my parents. So Jerusalem is my town. With the Iran deal, that can be a tricky thing. We are concerned as Israel because we see what Iran is doing, enriching uranium 10 times than what she agreed to in the deal. Terror, like I said, creating instability. So that's something that we are concerned. But I think the communication channels between the new American administration and the Israeli leadership will remain open and direct and honest. And again, I think the administration is just starting, so we'll have to see more.
Can you talk a little bit about your relationship, the consulate that is, with Washington State government level? Do you have a relationship with our governor and our state Congress?
So yes, we do. In the last 3 months, everything is going through phone calls and Zoom. We have a few calls with the governor's office. Some of the legislators, I can't remember by heart all the names and when we had different calls with each congressman or senator, but there's good relationship. We'll be talking about some of them actually visiting Israel, but due to COVID, all the visits has been on hold. But all in all, the relationship is very good, and there's there's cooperation and things that we do on the ground.
Okay, I want to open it up. I think we've had a lot of great questions here, but if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, or if you prefer to put it in the chat, this has been very informative. Here's a question. Is your law degree from Israel or from the United States?
So it's from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, where I went to law school. And then I worked at the Israeli Supreme Court, but not as a lawyer or an intern. But I worked for there's a Center for Citizenship and Democracy that basically brings high school students, college students, soldiers from the IDF, and visitors from Israel and from abroad to tour the Supreme Court, see the discussion, an actual trial. I was the head of that, and we had thousands per month. I was the head of that center for about a year, and I was a tour guide for 2 years. I was a tour guide in the old city in Jerusalem. So for the next time you go to, I said it because for the next time you go to Israel and after COVID, make sure that not just the old city or the Shuk Machniuda to have like great Israeli food and not all the must, but see if you can also find yourself a tour at the Israeli Supreme Court. It's fascinating. It's very different the American Supreme Court, by the way. The whole system is different. And I'm sure we can, again, have a whole separate lecture about that. But a visit to the Israeli Supreme Court will be something that, an experience for you to remember, both because it's very different and also it's a very unique institute
I can second that. It's very worthwhile. I haven't been recently, but I remember on my gap year having a tremendous experience visiting it.
Yeah, and the architecture of the Supreme Court is very special. The symbolism behind the building is also unique.
Jeff, do you have a question?
I was going to ask a question, please. Yes. Thank you for joining us tonight. Much appreciated. The question I was going to ask you about is that you mentioned before about Israeli families that want to move back to Israel. And what if you have a situation where there's a family that's mixed with both Israeli members of the family and American members of the family, and they want to come to Israel?
Yeah, what are the zuchiyot?
So I'll tell you what, I think since it's like a very specific question, the best thing to do is just send me an email with all the details.
Okay.
And I can look into the specific case. I'll just say that so they're basically doing Aliyah as a family, then there'll be, it will go with the Israeli citizen. So it will go, if there's an Israeli citizen in the family, it will be what we call a Toshav Choser, an Israeli returning to Israel. And then he'll get the rights of a Toshav Choser, and then the non-Israeli will start a process of getting the Israeli citizenship through marriage. Because it's easier than doing an Aliyah, and there's no need to do Aliyah if you're married to an Israeli citizen.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Matan? Well, I just want to say that this has been an absolute pleasure, and I hope that this will be the first of very many conversations that we have with the consulate. One of the reasons we're bringing this in is that we'd like to strengthen our relationship with the Israeli consulate in San Francisco, and for the Israeli consulate to let you know that they are here for us, and it's a beautiful relationship that we have. I have another question for you, though, before we go. Do you need a special pass or invite to visit the Israeli Supreme Court?
Yes, and it's not a matter of special pass or invite. There's a need to just log on the website and schedule a tour. I mean, if you just want to go in and visit yourself without a tour, you can do it. The court is open for the public. But I would recommend to go on the website or get a tour so you can have like a tour guide explaining everything. And but if you just want to go, and the only discussion that are closed to the public are if there's a minor or state secret. So very, very few discussions will be closed, but most of the criminal, civil, or administrative discussions will have open doors for the public to enter and just sit and watch. In Hebrew, yeah. I also want to say, Rabbi, thank you for hosting me. I really wished I could be at the congregation and speaking to you like in person and getting to know you better. I was in Seattle just once. I came here a little over a year ago. I had the chance to visit Seattle during COVID and had very few meetings because I just felt I can't be here in San Francisco and not see Seattle at all. So despite COVID, I traveled once, but I will make sure that I have at least 3 to 4 more years to go. So I'll make sure that, COVID is over soon, right? That's what everybody's saying. So once COVID is over, I'll make sure that I come and visit, and I'd love to be able to visit the congregation.
Thank you, Matan. We would be honored to host you. And if I'm coming down to San Francisco for one of my kids' passports, we'll have to go and get a shawarma or a falafel together.
Sounds good. Perfect.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to stop it here.